the U.S. economy and neutral info regarding the election. We'll begin the presentation by talking about the real GDP growth rate, which is the monetary value of all goods and services produced in an economy. Latest real GDP growth rate is 0.1%. This would put us in a recessionary gap as the goal rate is 3%. And some past reference would show us that although not as bad as in 2008 and 2009 with several consecutive quarters of large decline, we would want it closer to a 3%, which could help us achieve long-run equilibrium if current output equals potential output, while right now our current output is less than potential output with a real GDP growth rate of only 0.1%. Okay, we're going to move on to the unemployment rate, which is the percentage of the total labor force that is unemployed but actively seeking employment and willing to work. The latest unemployment rate for the U.S. economy is 7.7%, which would put us in a recessionary gap, as it is over the natural rate of unemployment, which is 5%. If we're going to look at some past reference, we can see that since about mid-2009, the unemployment rate has been steadily decreasing, which one would want, but it is still over 5%, the natural rate of unemployment, which would still leave us in a recessionary gap. Okay, now we're going to move on to the main causes of the Great Recession. The general consensus is the main cause behind this recession is when the housing bubble burst in 2006 and caused housing prices to decline. As homeowners realized that they would lose insane amounts of money by selling the house for less than their mortgage, they foreclosed. This escalating foreclosure rate panicked many banks and hedge funds who had bought those mortgage-backed securities and now were facing huge losses. By 2007, these banks became extremely afraid to lend to each other because they didn't want these toxic loans as collateral. This led to numerous bankruptcies and an incredible spike in the unemployment rate. By 2009, the real GDP growth rate absolutely plummeted well below the goal rate of 3%. The unemployment rate absolutely skyrocketed well above the natural rate of unemployment of 5%, and the inflation rate also plummeted, sometimes going into the negative numbers. These are all indicators of a recessionary gap, but since that harsh change in 2009, all those numbers have been generally steadily getting closer to their goal rates, which would indicate although in a recessionary gap for the past 4 or so years, it is an expanding economy.
In 2008, the U.S. economy was in a recessionary gap. To help get us out of it, President Obama and Congress passed the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, which raised government spending across the board by $831 billion. The act was a combination of tax incentives, infrastructure, education, healthcare, and a few others. In 2002 and into 2013, we were dealing with a fiscal cliff in which the Democrats wanted to keep the Bush-era tax cuts for all but the top 2% of taxpayers. The Republicans wanted the tax cut to extend for all taxpayers. As you can see from the graphs, our GDP started going up after the ARRA of 2009, and unemployment went down, so that law appears to have worked. As for the Fiscal Cliff Act, or the American Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012, the RGDP grew but very little. The unemployment has gone down though. Obama wanted the tax cuts to expire on people making over $200,000 a year or more to raise revenue. The Republicans did not want to raise taxes because they don't believe in raising taxes. They would rather cut spending to decrease the deficit. Both do coincide with theory. You can see from the last graph of what some experts project in years to come, given the policies enacted currently. The current U.S. budget is planning a deficit of $901 billion for the year 2013, with a revenue of $2.9 trillion and a projected expenditures or spending of nearly $3.8 trillion. This will add to our total national debt of $16.7 trillion. The U.S. has not balanced a budget where total revenue equals total expenditures since 2001 with President Clinton. Ever since then, there has been a deficit and our national debt has grown rapidly. There are a few main causes of the national debt, which include Bush-era tax cuts, healthcare entitlements, Medicare drug benefits, and our war on terror. Obama's proposal for cutting the deficit and national debt includes a variety of spending cuts and tax increases. He wants to decrease domestic and security spending, specifically bipartisan agreements with Republicans on where those spending cuts should take place. This will account for $2 trillion. He also wants to make Medicare more flexible and efficient, which will reduce $1 trillion, along with other health care reform. The last thing is tax reform. He wants to close tax loopholes and also reduce tax expenditures. Boehner and the Republicans do not want any additional tax increases, and if they agree to any, they must go directly to paying down the deficit. They want across-the-board spending cuts to pay off the deficit.
Now an individual may have a little more information regarding the U.S. economy for the upcoming election.